Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Mobility Matters. I'm your host, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. We are the quasi-independent agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. Really excited about today because, number one, it is our first show of the new year. So Happy New Year to all of you tuning in. And I want to say Happy New Year to my first guest of the new year, the chairman of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, or CITT for short, Robert Wolfarth. Robert, welcome back to the program.
It is a pleasure to be here with you, Mr. Executive Director. I couldn't think of a better way to ring in the new year than to talk about transportation, one of everyone's favorite subjects in Miami-Dade County. So, I'm very optimistic for the upcoming year and what we're able to do to help move forward the SMART plan with the PTP and explain a little bit about what we do at the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust.
Right, and no one better to do it than you.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure.
And how long have you been on the CITT now?
Well, I've been on the CITT for a little over 5 years.
Gosh, it's been that long. How time flies. Right?
It really has been. I can remember my first meeting, which was October 10th, 2019, where we had a very important vote, and that was the vote on the Aventura train station, which was passed.
Right, and that was particularly important to you because you represent that district, right? So just as a reminder to folks, the 15 members of the CITT, 13 of them are appointed by their county commissioners, and you have to live in that district, right, to be appointed. So you were appointed first by Commissioner Heyman,
correct,
then by Steinberg, representing District 4. So what does that district entail? So
District 4 goes from about mid-Miami Beach all the way up to the Broward County line, from the ocean and inland. We're a very unique district because we have the most municipalities in District 4, 13 municipalities, and also some unincorporated Miami-Dade as well. The Northeast Corridor, which you just referenced, is mostly in District 4. And, I worked with Commissioner Heyman in order to get that Brightline station with a positive vote. And I was happy during my tenure at the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust that we actually had a ribbon cutting. Yeah. The station has been open for quite some time. It's very successful, and it is for the Miami-Dade section terminus for the Northeast Corridor. And what's extremely exciting is that it's one of the 6 segments of the transportation corridors of the SMART plan, the Miami
Strategic Area Rapid Transit Plan. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And so we're right in the middle right now of a very important vote with Congress. Almost $400 million has been allocated with the Biden administration through the infrastructure bill, bipartisan infrastructure bill, and there'll be a vote coming up in Congress very soon to allocate those $400 million for the Northeast Corridor. There's going to be 5 stations that are going to be built in between Miami Central and the Aventura station. And what's very exciting is that a lot of these stations are going to be P3 projects, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of developers that own land around potential station sites, and we'll be able to get those stations built, hopefully without too much of taxpayers' money. And in return for that, we're going to be able to build up some infrastructure within that corridor around those stations, which is really part of the overall plan for Miami-Dade County as far as how we grow. It's very important that these transit-oriented developments along our corridors are developed as we grow as a county.
Yeah, it's really 2 sides of the same coin, as I like to say, right? You have transit, but then you have the land use that's necessary to make the transit work, and vice versa. Transit helps the land use because, without transit, you're just unloading cars onto the street, and our streets are already rather congested. We don't really have the ability to expand them or to widen them at this point, right? So they need to grow in tandem, transit and land use and development, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And you really, you can't talk about housing without talking about transportation. You can't talk about building new infrastructure for schools, right? Employment opportunities. And I think the long-range plan for growth for Miami-Dade County is going to be growth in a vertical. When I was growing up, the growth in Miami-Dade County was to the west, right?
Go west, young man.
And West Kendall it was, Miami Lakes it was. And I don't think that there was the right planning back then, right? So the infrastructure was not built to build out into the west parts of the county and the south parts of the county and the northeast part of the county. And so we have built up to the UBD, and so we cannot go build out any further. There really is no more land. We are developing some in Homestead and south and the south
losing
part
our
of the
agriculture in the process, unfortunately. But
and we just witnessed that ourselves when we were out for a meeting, and we went. We stopped by. Robert is here.
Yes, named after you, of course, right?
Of course.
It was kind of sad to go to Robert is here, and then immediately across the street there's this large residential development, which we need the housing,
right?
But my gosh, Robert is here was always cool because it was you felt like you were in farmland, and now it's lost that.
It has lost that feel to it.
Yeah. The produce is still good,
right?
Even Robert is here,
and the shakes are still
all the
good
shakes
too.
are amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, Robert, and so. I love talking about transit-oriented developments with you because you have a real estate background, so you know what you're talking about. So tell us about your background in real estate.
Sure, absolutely. So we, as a family business, did a lot of development. We would take existing multifamily properties and convert them into condominium, and we were very successful with a lot of areas around the Dadeland North and South Station that were very walkable, and it was part of the allure of having people, purchase in there. And we're very proud because we were able to offer very affordable housing because it was existing properties at the time. And so, I've developed a great knowledge about the development, and I for many years saw it on that side, and for several years I was asked to join the Miami Beach Planning Board, and I got to understand a little bit from the other side, the government side. And so what was very important is that when developers were come to a planning board, they're often asking for variances. They're also often asking for things to increase their development, particularly traffic studies that may indicate that it may not be great. But what I've learned on the planning board and serving in that capacity is that, there has to be public benefit, right? And so that's extremely important. And so I think what I'm able to do is I'm able to bring a lot of that knowledge from the development side and into marrying that with the government side and with the transportation and how we can move forward with our SMART plan.
Yeah, and you talked about, that some of the potential TODs on the Northeast corridor, but really, there's a lot happening even with the existing system in terms of TODs, and then on the other corridors. You want to speak to some of those?
Absolutely. I think, our original corridor that was built out and started in the 1970s was Metro Rail, right? Sure. Coming from downtown and going down to Dadeland, right? So Dadeland was the original kind of TOD, although it may not have been called a TOD back then, but there was the
TOD before TOD was cool. Right?
That's right. And so there's an increase in FAR around that area, and it made it a natural terminus for the Metro Rail itself. But since then, and as I was reminded as I came down US 1 today, is that we've got really some great successful TODs that are already in place in Miami-Dade County, such as Douglas Station, such as Grove Station. There's a lot happening in South Miami.
It's just down the block here,
and just down the block here, So, those are very important, and so the precedent has been set that we can successfully do TODs. Those are also going to be continuing as we open the South Corridor, which I'm very excited about because it's our first corridor that's going to be opening in our SMART plan, and that runs from Dadeland South all the way down to Homestead. And so we have the train like BRT that's going to be opening up later this year, and it's going to have preemption all the way down the homestead, so that it's a direct. Directly all the way down there. And there's great opportunities along the way to build out some TODs. And we have community buy-in, particularly you had a guest on, the mayor, I believe, of Cutler Bay, who is completely bought into the building out TODs and getting the infrastructure built there.
Yeah, they have a huge project underway, I think, reconverting the old, I still call it Cutler Ridge Mall. I think it's Southland Mall, and now it's going to be, South something City Place, right?
Yeah.
And it's like $1 billion
project that's going to be taking
exciting.
off. And so, so that's very exciting. So that's where we can increase some FAR, floor area ratio.
Right.
We can get some infrastructure in there, and we can get the ridership, which is so desperately needed on that corridor, which is one of the reasons that we weren't qualified to get a rail down that as far as federal funds. So the South Corridor was built out so that it could transition into the future into a rail system, as the community was promised originally. You know, when we voted 22 years ago on the half-penny tax, so that we could get the rail down there. So there's tremendous opportunities there. We have community buy-in on the North Corridor, which is going to go up to Northwest 27th Avenue, all the way up to Hard Rock Stadium, up to the county line again. And there's tremendous opportunities for some new TODs that are going to be in that section as well. So, you know, the future of Miami-Dade County growth is going to be in a vertical way with transit-oriented development and transit-oriented communities.
Yeah, I know there's often backlash in the community about development and continuing to grow, but the reality is it's going to happen. And so the question then becomes, where do you place that development where it makes the most sense, where people have alternatives to getting in a single occupancy vehicle. Right, because I think what people are most concerned with is the impacts to traffic. I think they're already up to here. Here comes more development. It's only going to worsen our roadways, and so that's why it's critical to place that growth in places where transit is currently established or going to come in the ensuing years, right? So that we can get people onto transit instead of onto those congested roadways.
Well, and that's a very important part, because in some of this development, there will be less garages needed, less cars needed, because people will be able to get onto the transit, and they'll be able to have maybe 1 or 2 seat rides to different areas of the county. So that's the vision, is that we have our SMART plan, which is going to be the transportation spine of the county moving forward. And so my vision is to have development where cars are not needed, Manhattan style, right? Where people don't have as many cars, or very few people have cars in that area, because they are able to take the subway system, and they're able to move around the city in a very effective way. And we're not there yet, but I think that, we are at a point right now that it's untenable. What used to take 20 minutes to get from one part of the county to another part, or 40 minutes, now takes a couple of hours. And so I think that people, the residents, the citizens, understand now how important it is to build out. And that was manifested in last August, when former Chairman Oliver Gilbert put a straw vote to the voters, and nearly 80% of Miami-Dade County voters are in a buy-in for expanding our transportation system via Metro Rail, Metro Mover, very sophisticated transportation systems that way. And so I think we now have community buy-in, and one of the subjects that he brought up when we were at a luncheon recently, where he was interviewed by WLRN, was the cost of this.
Yes.
And
it doesn't come free.
It does not come free. It's very expensive, and it's his estimates are $6 billion to build out the infrastructure transportation plan. I've heard numbers that are a little bit higher, but I'll go with $6 billion right now.
Minimum of $6 billion. We'll go there.
Well, and so the question is, how do we leverage our local funds, where we now collect about $400 million in PTP funds, right? And those are our job as the watchdog, Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, that was also voted on 22 years ago with the half-penny tax. The citizens didn't exactly think the county would spend the money exclusively on transportation. So we were voted in tandem on that so that we could be the watchdog to make sure that those funds were exclusively set aside and used for the expansion of transportation.
And people were wary of another lottery situation, right?
Right.
The money for the lottery was supposed to go to education, and it did, but then they defunded, the funding they were providing.
Right.
So it ended up being not really an increase, I guess.
So
we keep that from happening.
Right. So our job is to make sure that doesn't happen, right? And so also our job is to make sure and put the pressure on the county to make sure that we leverage those funds with federal funds like we did on the South Corridor. South Corridor was 1/3 local funds, PTP funds, 1/3 federal funds, and 1/3 state funds. And I think that's how, and as well as the P3 partnerships, which is very important, like Aventura Station that I mentioned, and some of the other stations that are going to be on the Northeast Corridor. So he mentioned that we realized that the revenues from the half-penny tax may not be enough to get to that. So one of the challenges moving forward is how are we going to supplement our PTP funds and to bring it in? And so that's going to be a challenge moving forward. We know we have buy-in from the community. Now, as we move forward, how do we put that into play? Is it a general obligation bond? Is it an increase in millage? So these are the questions.
Is it another half-penny potentially, right?
Is it another half-penny tax? Do we have the trust from the voters at this point where another half-penny would pass?
And the truth is, it was always meant to be a penny. My understanding is that was the original plan, and the promises that were made as part of the People's Transportation Plan were really based on a full penny. And it was only in order to get the item passed at County Commission, they had to do some negotiation that they dropped it to a half penny. However, the promises still remained kind of at that penny level. And so we essentially overpromised. So it's not that we haven't delivered on the half penny. It was never enough from the very beginning to accomplish the things that were promised. And so we do need additional funding, right?
We do. And I think we're gaining the trust of the voters again, right? So, we have a lot of projects that are coming up online, which are very important. Like I mentioned, the South Corridor coming up. We did do the Orange Line, which is from the MIC and to the Arlington Heights. That we did to get that accomplished.
Right. The airport station.
Absolutely. And also, part of that sausage making that you just mentioned in order to get the half penny moving forward was 20% of our funds go towards the local municipalities so that they can fund their local transportation projects and their trolley system as well. So, it's really less than the half a penny that comes in. And it's about $400 million now that comes in. But you take 20% off of that goes towards that goes towards the local municipalities, and it really is a whole lot less.
And people forget about operations and maintenance, right? So it's easy to think, okay, we're going to build out this project. It's going to cost $1 billion, and that's all we need. But the reality is then you have to operate and maintain that line or that service for another 30, 40 years or indefinitely. And that ends up costing more than the initial capital investment. And that's where we're really finding some challenges moving forward, right? Even with the existing system, operating and maintaining the existing system.
That's right. That's right. Operations and maintenance are very important. And, we exclusively use PTP funds for the projects that were done since 2002 when it was voted on. And so, we had a little bit of a snag back when we had the recession, right? Mm-hmm. So we were short funds. And so the BCC back then voted to have some of the PTP funds used for operations and maintenance on other parts of the transportation system. And I think it's very important, since I've been on the trust and since you've been executive director, we've unwound all those funds being used for previously existing transportation infrastructure, and we're now focused back on getting those funds towards new projects that are coming up and the operations and maintenance on the projects that were finished since 2002.
Okay, so we've talked at length about, the South Corridor and the Northeast Corridor, both of which are very exciting, right? Yes. South Corridor under construction is going to open this year. Northeast Corridor is probably going to be the next one to be implemented. The stars seem to be aligning. What, in your estimation, is the next logical corridor or likely corridor? I would imagine the Beach Corridor, is near and dear to your heart. Do you think that might be the next in line?
Well, I think there's two corridors actually that are next in line, and so naturally, the beach corridor, it's kind of it's a natural, and that the ridership
is there for sure.
The ridership is definitely there, and we have to remember that now what used to be called the Bay Link, which is now the beach corridor, it also includes a section that goes up to the design district also, which is a very important segment of that as well, and so. There have been many different iterations of the Bay Link over the past many decades. I think one of the last ones was having the Metro Metro Mover extend over to 5th Street and Lenox Avenue as station number 1, and then another station on Washington Avenue and 5th Street, and then with ultimately the connection coming up to the convention center, which would be a bus that goes up to Washington Avenue to get people to the convention center. It's a natural one, but again, we have to have community buy-in. Yeah. And the feds, if we want to leverage our funds, they hear it. And so Miami Beach recently passed a resolution to look for alternative methods of transportation. And so I know that the county is exploring that right now. We'll see what happens. I think it's extremely important. I think we learned at our last meeting through our new director at DTPW that I think they bifurcated out some of those lines, and there's now studies that are being done for the design district section. I'm not sure how they're going to separate those two out, but I know that they are moving on that section, which at least there's some movement on that. So I'm pushing to have that done. I thought, speaking of the vote that happened in August of last year, I was very interested to see how people voted, where they voted. And so, you look at some of the precincts that were around the potential 5th and Lenox location, and you had the same type of voter results, 80%. About 80%, 78.5%. And you had it around those areas also, the south of 5th neighborhood, the West Avenue neighborhood, and the Flamingo Park neighborhood. So there's buy-in from the residents in that community too. So they really do want an expansion of the transportation system. I think another natural corridor that I think could be coming up, and it certainly has the potential and is needed, is what we talked about, is the North Corridor. It's long overdue. I think the LPA for that is the elevated hard rail and extension of Metro Rail all the way up, as I mentioned, to Hard Rock Stadium. I think there's incredible development opportunity over there. If that's where the county's going to grow, I think it's up Northwest 27th Avenue in that area. And you have community buy-in.
Yes, so absolutely.
That's extremely important, right? Yeah. And so going back to the beach, I think one of the fears is that the county can preempt, and they can carve out areas, and they can give an increase in FAR, right? So I do agree that some areas are already built out. We just topped off a very tall building on 5th Street and between Alton and Lenox Avenue. And so we have the density there. We have a lot of density south of 5th. So I think the density is already there for some areas. Some areas we can increase the density. I often think of the SMART plan as, 6 children, right? They're all in different development stages.
Yeah, they all have their own personalities.
They all have their own personalities, and and I think that that's a very exciting part.
But we love them all equally as parents,
exactly.
There's one more that I in particular think is needed, and I think the community would support is, and that's the East-West corridor, right? And I know that was at one point slated to be bus rapid transit on State Road 836. I think the commission wisely decided to kind of take a step back from that and rethink it. I always thought that was kind of an odd solution to the problem, right? People don't want to get on a highway to get on a bus. And so they're rethinking that and then looking at a couple of alternatives, right? Either using the existing CSX rail lines to do something like Tri-Rail, or perhaps even doing something on Flagler Street with Metro Mover. Yeah. What are your thoughts on East-West?
Well, okay, so we started with the easier ones that are to obtain. Yeah. And so going out west really is an absolute absolute challenge. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we had the development out west, but the infrastructure was not thought of. So now we have a lot of catch up to do with there. And so we actually do need a couple of east-west lines, desperately needed. And the people that voted for the half-penny tax out west, they were promised an extension of mass rapid transit also. And so I really I like some of the vision Commissioner Eileen Higgins has, who's chair of the Transportation Committee for Miami-Dade County. She has a lot of ideas that are out there. I'm a fan of one of her ideas, which is to get an extension of Metro Rail to some extent on one of those streets out there. Either
it was Metro Mover,
yeah, Metro Mover out there, and so I think that's a great alternative. I think out to FIU makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
It's a natural terminus that's out there.
And speaking of TODs earlier, we invested in the Dolphin Park and Ride out west, and that's going to be one of the largest transit-oriented developments, not only in the county, but probably in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
So yeah, the transit has to follow development and vice versa, right? It's the only way that this is going to work.
That's right. It's almost like build it and they will come.
Yeah.
I think that would happen. And I look at the Metro Rail that was developed in the 1970s, right? Mm-hmm. So for many decades, we would have stations where you would get out and you'd go out and there'd just be a parking lot there. Yeah. There was nothing there. And so, it was built out, and now we're getting those TODs, and now we're getting the infrastructure that's built there. And so it's not easy. And there was a lot of opposition to Metro Rail back when it was originally built. We had President Reagan back at the time that said, what, for the cost that you're going to build Metro Rail, you could just buy everyone a car,
right.
Which defeated the whole purpose of building out the Metro Rail itself. So, we have to have a long-term vision for the county. And so, one of the highlights for me, being chair of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, is we have a new member, Miguel Murphy, who is a director for student engagement at the Miami-Dade College. And I think every meeting that we have, he brings in a different contingent of scholars there. And I spend some time after the meeting talking with them. And these are young people. Mm-hmm. These are our future leaders. Yeah. These are people that are interested in transportation, because they stay for the whole 3.5 hours, 4 hours of our meetings, and they listen intently. And they have a lot of opinions about transportation for Miami-Dade County. And so I love engaging with these young people. And, I'm thinking of them. And I know when they start their families in 10 years, they're going to be thinking of their children, right? And so now we're moving up to the 22nd century, right? 75 years away. So, we have to be thinking towards the long term. And so these things are not built out in a few years. They do take decades to build out. And I think with the BCC, the county commission, I think there's a buy-in now, as there wasn't, 20 years ago. Yeah. And I think that they see that there's a need. Yeah. I think that there's the federal monies that are in play right now. And we have buy-in from the state as well. They realize that we are a dense metropolitan area. We are not the Panhandle. We are not North Florida, and they understand the needs that we have.
Yeah. Listen, we can't continue to expand our roadways here. We're constrained. And so, it's either do nothing or do transit.
That's right.
And yes, transit is expensive, but as Commissioner, then Chairman Oliver Gilbert said, what's the cost of doing nothing? It's even higher.
That's right.
Right, the opportunity cost. So $6 billion sounds like a lot, but we're probably losing $10 billion a year in economic activity, and productivity by not having, a better option, right, to sit in traffic. And then there's the brain drain. I'm glad that you mentioned the young students, because, they're facing a very challenging environment in Miami-Dade County. You can't move around, and probably even more of an impact is you can't afford to live here. And so the TODs are a critical component of that too, right? If we could build affordable housing on transit lines, all of a sudden you make it viable for the young people to stay here and thrive here.
That's right. And that's such an important matter because, as I mentioned before, you can't talk about housing without transportation, talking about conversations there, or education or employment opportunities, right? And so I speak to a lot of heads of Fortune 500 companies, and so, their top three problems with moving to Miami-Dade, and they really do want to, but it is transportation, sitting in traffic, the cost of housing for their middle management and for their employees that are going to be moving here, and quality education, right? And so all three of these things can be combined in our transportation corridors. We can build it out, and if we are going to be a viable, successful Miami-Dade County, this is the direction that we must move in. We really don't have a choice, and I think people realize that at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're at an inflection point, and I've never seen a county commission so united around transit before. I think there was kind of an old guard that really just didn't believe in transit, much like Ronald Reagan. Just roadway. But it's clearly not the viable path forward at this point, so we have to invest in transit. Now, transit isn't the only, I guess, focus area for us and the county and the municipalities. Let's talk about first, last mile connectivity, right? Because you can build out these 6 corridors. You get people kind of long distances, but once they get to their destination, they need to get to that place of employment, that school. They need to get back home. And unless you're living, within a block of the station, chances are you have to figure out that first, last mile problem. So, let's talk about that. What are some of the first, last mile kind of initiatives that are underway that you're aware of?
Well, I think that, for instance, a lot of our municipalities are participating in first mile, last mile. They take some of the PTP funds, the 20% that is allocated to them based upon their population. It depends upon how much money that they get. And they are implementing trolleys, right? So started off with trolleys. Trolleys are very successful. So we're able to get to those transportation nodes, and we're able to get closer to where people need them, to their places of work and places of residences. Trolleys have been very successful. One of the things that has kind of transitioned since I've been on the trust is the use of the freebie system. I was originally skeptical of the freebie. Was thinking a car, one person in a car being.
It's not mass transit.
It's not mass transit. But you know what? It's actually working, and from the numbers, because we get on our monthly meetings, we have a rotation of municipalities to come and report back to us on what they're doing with their PTP funds that they're getting, right? And so, and I see the numbers, and the numbers are really good on the freebie, and so people are using the freebie effectively to get from one place to another. Another idea is, we talked about walking. That's one thing. It's great when we have a day like today, when the weather is absolutely beautiful in the 60s, right?
We should have done this outside.
That's another thing when it's September, though. That's that's a real problem. So, we hear back from a lot of municipalities. They have a lot of scooter program, which is great for young people. Works particularly well in the urban areas, like around Brickell Avenue, where you have a lot of different vendors like Lime that are able to implement that type of a system. But there's also bike paths that we're very instrumental in, and so I've been a convert to bicycles. I recently came back from the Netherlands, where we had a very successful immersion program with the Royal Dutch Embassy for bicycles, and this was a program put on by the TPO, the Transportation Planning Organization. Their executive director, Eileen Bouclé, put this whole immersion program together with them, and she got together a diverse group of private developers, architects, county leaders, but not just from Miami-Dade County, but also from Broward County and from Palm Beach County, because I like her vision. She thinks regional, right? Not just Miami-Dade County. And she has great cooperation, great relationships with the leadership of Broward County, who, by the way, has a full halfpenny tax.
Yes, a full penny.
And great relationship with Palm Beach County, which is looking to us and talking to us about implementing their own transportation surtax. And so I know we've been talking with those folks up there, because it is important, because transportation does not stop at Aventura Station.
Nothing does, right? I mean, the reality is, from an economic standpoint, we're one region. We're not competing with cities anymore. We're competing with other mega regions, whether that be the Dallas, Fort Worth, triangle out there, or the ones in the Northeast. It's about regions. And so we're either going to rise together or sink together. And not to mention environmental issues obviously don't respect jurisdictional boundaries either.
Right.
The water and the air, we're all in this together.
Yeah, we are. And so, so I come from Miami Beach, and I think we're looked at by other regions, municipalities, statewide actually. We have a very progressive bike path program running through much of the city, and we have designated bicycle paths. That's part of the first mile, last mile option. We have a group of residents that are very pro-bicycle, and they really push our commission on getting those bike paths in. And what's really needed are protected bike paths.
Absolutely.
And so people are very reluctant. I'm very reluctant to ride a bicycle. Sure. Accidents happen. And so one of the things I think we learned from our Netherlands trip is that, this can be done. And they have a holistic view of this. One of the surprising things that I learned is the average person living in the Netherlands has an average of 2 bikes, right? And so they ride their bike from where they live to a transportation train station, right? They have very complex bicycle garages over there. They ride their regional transit train to their place of employment or place of education. They have another bike in another garage that's located there, and they're able to bike back to the other. Right. And their bike paths, they are very sensitive to, and it's not one. There's not one fits all. Right. And so one of the things that we really learned is that depending upon location and the nature of the environment there, they build out according to those specifications. Sure. And they're not afraid to implement. They get a lot of feedback from people, but they're not afraid to implement a program. Then what they'll do is they'll study it, and they'll come back in, and they'll make changes to it. And I think that that's maybe a part that's missing in Miami-Dade County. We have a lot of very concerned residents, but and that are very knowledgeable about these things, and everybody kind of wants something different. But we need the boldness to implement a program and then not be afraid to come back and tweak it.
It's something we suffer from greatly in this community. It's the paralysis of analysis, right? When you come upon something difficult, let's just study it. Well, we've been studying, and I'm a planner. I love to plan, right? It's my profession, but I prefer to implement. And you're absolutely right. And we tend to be risk averse, and government in particular, because nobody wants to lose an election if you do something wrong. And so things end up not getting done. What I find is a sea change with the new commission is this desire to actually be bolder and to focus on implementation and take those risks. Do you find the same?
Oh, absolutely. And I was just talking about the vision of Commissioner Eileen Higgins.
Yes. We have to give her a huge shout out. There's no greater transit advocate than
no one. And she has spent, I don't know how many hours, she probably doesn't know how many hours she's been in Washington, D.C. and in Tallahassee, really lobbying to get the funds that we really, really need. And so she's bold, and she's not afraid, and she's out there doing it, and she has a great vision. I know our transportation department of Transportation and Public Works has a great vision also, and we have great leadership all the way from the top up, from Mayor Levine Cava also, who has complete buy-in with what we're doing. But I agree. If you look at the past decades and all the money that is spent on planning, engineering studies, feasibility studies, PD&E studies, environmental studies, we could have had a transportation system built by now, and so, but I'm looking forward to the future. I think we're there right now. I think with the opening of our first corridor, I see it as being very optimistic. We actually have a lot of momentum moving in a lot of the other corridors. So I'm really looking forward to this next year.
And speaking of bold leadership, I think we would be remiss if we only focused on government, right? Because there is the public sector, but then there's also the private and nonprofit sector. And one of the folks that I love, and I'm sure you share this, is one of the members of our board who is really taking bold leadership in advancing a particular trail that's near and dear to everyone's heart, and that's the Underline. And it was not an easy task. She started that project probably 10 years ago when we didn't necessarily have people bought into things like bicycle trails.
That's right.
And it's not a cheap project because it's being done correctly. It's not just a bicycle path. It's a linear park. There's programming for events. It's it's a long trail, and so it's very kind of context sensitive. So there might be a part of the underline in Brickell that is very active, and then there may be other parts along the line where abuts a suburban area, and so it's maybe a little more relaxed. But I just want to give a shout out to Member Daly, because it also takes leadership from the public, the community, the nonprofit and private sectors to get these things going. It's not all public sector.
Yeah, and Meg has been unbelievable. She is she's a great asset to the CITT. She was able to appoint her as chair of our community outreach, and she's had some bold visions to get the word out there to the community, to let people know what we are doing with the half-penny tax. And so one of her missions and initiatives was to get you and I out there to the community, and we've been doing a lot of you particularly, a lot of presentations to chambers of commerce throughout Miami-Dade County. We just came from Bay Harbor yesterday doing a presentation, great presentation that we did. And so it's great educating people. Day before, we were at Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce, and we had a huge audience there to let people know what we're doing there. And so this is the way to get the community buy-in. And so she's been very important in that.
She has, and it's not just her vision for the underline. I mean, I haven't seen anyone do community engagement as well as her, to get that buy-in. And part of that isn't just educating people and information out, it's getting that information in. And they did a lot of work up front to understand what the community wanted, right? And that's why people buy into something, because you've listened to them, you've heard them, and they see what their ideas translated into the plan and now into the construction. And that builds trust. Right?
Yeah.
And let's see. So let's go back to the CITT. We've come full circle. You've been chair now for about a year. You have another year to go. Let's look forward to 2025. What are your priorities? What would you like to get accomplished as chair in your remaining months here?
Well, I think 2025 is a very important year, pivotal year, and I think that gaining the trust of the public is extremely important, particularly if we're going to be going out and asking for an increase in transportation funds that are so desperately needed. So I think that we need to show the community that their money is being put to work, and I think by opening up the South Corridor is going to be very implemental. I'm very excited about that. I think getting Congress to lobbying. We're having a lunch tomorrow with Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, right? Yeah. And so we have a couple of items to talk to him about, and one of them is making sure that Congress passes this $400 million so that we can leverage for the Northeast Corridor, so we can leverage those funds. We have another item that we're going to talk to him about. Which we could spend a whole other program on. Not sure if we have enough time, but it was just announced at our last meeting that Amtrak is pulling out of the MIC to the airport, and so the MIC was designed with Florida Department of Transportation funds to Amtrak specifications to get it in there. So the vision of the MIC was a transportation center.
The I in MIC is intermodal.
Yeah,
right?
It's intermodal. So not only do we have the Metro Rail that comes in there, but we also have Tri-Rail that comes in there. It's a car rentals that are in there. Right. We have a massive bus complex that's in there. And part of that was having Amtrak come in there. Yeah. And so we've been getting updates pretty regularly over the past couple of years. And so, they were very close to negotiating a fee for using it. And so at our last meeting to have that pull out was very surprising. I think we're going to explore that. We're going to get some answers on that. And we're going to push. I proposed having a resolution that was supported by the members at our last meeting, a resolution of our dissatisfaction and pushing to open up talks again to having Amtrak come back into the MIC.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was always the vision. It makes sense even more so today, right, for Amtrak to continue down. So I was equally disappointed to see that. Somehow or another, for some reason, Amtrak, or just trains in general, kind of people are very not only interested in it, but passionate about it. Trained people are passionate. I've never seen anything quite like it. Maybe bike advocates are equally passionate, but we even heard from an association, right?
That's right. Someone reached out to me, Mr. James Tilley, who's president of a train riders association that's actually based out in Tampa, and learned that he got his start by getting funds, private and public funds, for the renovation of Union Station in Tampa. And so this became on his radar, and we're going to be working with him on pushing FDOT for some answers, pushing Amtrak for some answers, and we're also going to be reaching out to Representative Frederica Wilson. I don't think this is on her radar yet, but when it's on her radar, I know she's going to be, tenacious about getting some answers as to why this, because she was a big proponent of having Amtrak come into the MIC. So it's going to. So we're going to push on that a little bit, and we're going to see what happens, because I think that's part of our overall comprehensive transportation for Miami-Dade County. We have a lot that's going on with the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, and so we're going to be pushing on the North Corridor, right? And so I know there's a vision out there to have it completed by 2037. I know there's some dissatisfaction about that as well, but we're gonna continue to push on that. I know that we're in the middle of doing some studies on that corridor as well, and I'm going to be pushing on the beach corridor as well. I think that's extremely important. It does not make sense not to have some type of transportation connection coming from the mainland onto the beach. You can just see when you come over our causeways. You experienced that 2 days ago after leaving the Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce, when you were sitting on Alton Road, because because I-95 is backed up in Aventura. It affects all the way down 95 over the Julia Tuttle Causeway and onto Alton Road. So, and
there aren't a lot of ways around it, right? I mean, it's you only have so many choices on the beach.
yeah, exactly.
Well, so it sounds like there's a lot of exciting things happening in 2025, and CITT is kind of in the middle of a lot of this. So just out of curiosity, what drew you to the CITT, and what would you say to those folks who might be interested in joining?
Well, if you are listening and you experience transportation problems in Miami-Dade County, and I believe that would be 100% of you out there, I would say that it's very important that you get involved. And I mentioned the young people that are getting involved right now. But you don't have to be a young person. We have a lot of people with experience, and we really need people with experience with diverse backgrounds. And we have a great diverse trust right now. We do have 3 vacancies, though, and those are in districts 9, 11,
9, 10, and 12.
9, 10, and 12, right? And so those are a little further out south into the west of Miami-Dade. We have representation in the urban core areas, but it's very important that we have proper representation from all of Miami-Dade County. So if you are living out in some of those areas and you are interested in becoming more involved in transportation, and you'd like to have a say, you can have a say at the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. And so, I think it's extremely important that you get involved. What drew me to the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust is my own frustration with transportation. And so one of the things I was very excited about is when I was approached by former Commissioner Sally Hayman about the opening of the Aventura station. I was very happy to be involved in that because I saw it as part of the overall strategic plan for transportation in Miami-Dade County. So if you are interested, please go to our website, which is miamidade.gov/CITT, and you can fill out you can contact our executive director or his staff there.
Yeah, we actually have an application online, so you can download that, fill it in, and submit it.
Yeah, and I would highly encourage you. We have a great, diverse group. We have excellent executive director. We have wonderful staff that does the heavy lifting for us so that we're able to come together once a month and make our meetings very efficient, and we can get the knowledge that on some of the proposals that are come to us, and we can study those, and we can give our feedback to make sure that the PTP funds that are collected every year really are going towards mass rapid transportation.
Yeah. And we have a great trust, right? So the 15 member, well, currently 12 members of the CITT that are serving. It's a very collegial board. Everyone gets along. Everyone's trying to do the right thing. No one has, a political agenda. So you think about some of the fights that are taking place in some of these other groups. That doesn't take place at the CITT. It really is a positive experience, right?
Yeah, we really are a group of citizens, representing the different districts and the mayor and the League of Cities in the county. And so, yes, it is nonpartisan. And one thing that is amazing to me is that we all have a common goal, and that is to advance our transportation system and to make sure that those funds, we are the watchdog, we are the fiduciary of those funds, and we take that very, very seriously.
Right. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we're going to end there. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your service on the CITT and for everything you do. We really appreciate it. You've been a great chair, and I look forward to continuing to work with you throughout your tenure.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you this morning, and I look forward to doing it again soon because we have a lot going on. So
we do.
If you would have me back, we'll do an update.
No shortage of things to talk about, right? I think we only touched, the tip of the iceberg today. So, folks, that's all the time we have here on Mobility Matters. You can catch us here every other Thursday from 9 to 10 a.m. here in these wonderful studios. And I do want to thank our partners in this endeavor, Miami's community newspapers, for hosting us here and producing the program. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Till then, have a wonderful day and a great 2025. See you next time.